I have a joke to kick off. What's the difference between a Hippo and a Zippo? One's quite heavy and the other is a little lighter. Sorry.
I can hear the groans everywhere.
That's the groan of success.
That's a very dad joke.
I don't have any kids yet, I'm just practicing. So, point of this session, we thought we'd try something new in an attempt to get lots of more technical content out to you guys. And so what we're going to have is 4 presenters today that are going to cover a couple of highly focused topics. And we'll see how that goes. I'd be interested in your feedback at the end. To cover that content, we'll probably be pushed for time, so we'll push on. If there's something you want to know, yell it out, but if we can hold most of the questions till the end, that will be really helpful because I know what will happen, otherwise we'll never get through it all. I've gone a little bit crazy with the lightning theme, by the way. It kind of turned into a Star Wars theme, so I'm also going to apologise for that up front. So we're going to cover a few topics today. I thought I would kick off with one very quickly, which is APNS without APNS. You liked my background so much the other day that I thought I'd put another one in there. And for the sake of the presentation or the recording, my name's Crisco from JAMF. So what is APNS exactly? Well, it's the Apple Push Notification Service. Hopefully everyone here knows that, but maybe people don't, maybe people will play back the recording. So for the sake of a little bit of background, this is the framework that Apple has built for for themselves and for third-party providers to get notifications to devices. This surprised me when I looked it up, that it was actually announced back in June 2008. I'd forgotten that it was delayed for ages. You remember that? It took them like an actual year to get that done. They had to rebuild it for scalability. So it was June 2009. So I've had that for 7 years now, which is a great way of feeling old. And then a few years later, that came to OS 10 line as well. So things that that's used for, obviously iMessages, when you get a blue bubble. It's used for apps, so things like Instagram, Facebook, when they're going to send a notification to your device. And that's also the way that Apple has built MDM to do that, to use that framework. So how does it work? I love putting Xserves on slides. I just think it's really quirky. Now, of course, in this particular example, that Xserve could be Facebook, it could be Instagram, it could be, you know, an iMessage. These are basically any sort of provider at that point. And of course, Apple loves triangles, so no change there. What happens is the provider or wherever the stuff's coming from wants to send something to a device rather than have to contact that device directly, because in a mobile world, that device could be anywhere. It could be on any network. Instead, the device phones home to Apple. So this is actually this one here is actually a persistent outbound connection, which is why you see 2 arrows on here. And this confuses a lot of network teams because depending on their firewall, this is actually a connection that goes that way. Right? Let's open that direction. And that's because the device phones home to Apple. And it tries to do that over port 5223. In a lot of enterprise environments, that's not necessarily open. If you're on Wi-Fi, after a while, it will fall over to 443. Also, if you're on a device that's got a 3G or 4G connection, it's always going to prefer that over Wi-Fi as well. So that sometimes confuses people when they test this stuff with their phone and it works fine. It's because it's not actually using your network, it's actually using 3G. So let's say someone wants to send something to that device on this side. They actually send it up to Apple. That happens on port 2195. Most enterprise places never have this open, so this becomes a bit of a battle. And when you open it, you're opening it to that entire Apple subnet range there of 17 dot everything. the device has got this connection to Apple, so Apple basically say, hey, there's something for you, you've got to check in, and it goes, and then they talk directly, and this is when the actual data goes back and forth. I think most of you know that, but hopefully that's a good refresher for if you haven't seen it before. Now, what does that mean in terms of MDM? So it gets a little bit different here, or it's just good to understand how we use that. So we've got the JSS server on the left-hand side, device on the right. And of course, we've got to use the APNS as well. You can see we've sent that up to Apple. We've said to the device, Apple has said, there's something there for you. Go and check in with the server. It's done that. And this is how then we would do things like send down remote commands, like a remote wipe or a remote lock. We'd send down config files, and we'd send down stuff from the App Store. Now, in some cases, that you want to do more than that, right? You want to do a bit more heavy lifting. Typically, that's why people are getting Casper. And so we've got the agent on the device, which works in that legacy way of talking directly to the server. There's no APNS involved in that. And that's then how we would do things like, let's go and install this DMG, or let's run a script, etc., etc. Now, how exactly does Apple identify these Macs, right? Because on the left-hand side, if you imagine you're at Facebook here, right, you don't want to know exactly about all these devices. So if it's an iOS device, it's got basically this thing called an MDM token built into it, right? So it's always expecting to phone home to Apple. If it's a Mac, it has to generate this file itself. Now, when Apple started doing this with 10.7, this process was a little bit flaky, would take supposedly up to 15 minutes. You would just basically see pretty random behavior in general. This has got a lot better since then. So the device checks in with Apple. It creates this particular file, right? So this MDM computer prefs. And you could see various things in there. You could see the file not there at all, in which case it'll go back and regenerate that. It could be saying it needs poll. This quite often happens if you've left this file here and you built an image or you copied it to another machine. It then knows that this isn't quite right, and it means I've got to check in again and regenerate this. Or if everything's going okay, you'll see things like where the MDM server is. It's also got that push token in there, which means that it's capable of doing this. Now, what quite often goes wrong in this entire process tends to revolve more around either network teams or info security teams. So a place that doesn't have these ports required open needs to go and ask them. And if your place is anything like most of the ones I go into, they tend to say, bum bum. And some of those questions would be, we don't open up any extra ports, or what do you mean I've got to open up to 17 dot everything? No one could possibly own an entire class A all of their own. The other thing that can happen is certain proxy servers can get in the way, and that will actually stop that MDM token being generated. So the end result then tends to be you dead by the security team, and I think most of us have probably been in very similar meetings to that. Even if it's not about that, it could be pretty much any meeting with a security team tends to end this way, I find. From a technical perspective, what happens is you'll see in your MDM that it will actually say for this device that it's MDM capable no. And this used to confuse a few people a few years back when this process was probably more flaky. People would be, oh, I've got the ports open and I don't, or I've enrolled it and I'm still seeing MDM no and I can't send a config profile to it. I don't understand what's happening. So hopefully that explains why that's happening. This then becomes a problem for some customers who really want to do things like send a config profile to a device and they don't have APNS available to them. This happens a lot in China where they have this massive firewall that tends to stop a lot of things working. But they also tend to be very, very secure just on their corporate networks. It also happens a lot in Australia as well in enterprise type environments. Now, what are your options when this happens? Well, you could obviously take the config profile, put it into a package, then deliver that in a policy, or deliver it with Monkey or some other open source tool. Downside to this is it's a bit of a faff, right? You've got to either automate a workflow to do this, or go and do it yourself. A lot of people start off doing this and get kind of tired of doing this. I mean, the advantage of a config profile is it's got a nice GUI where you can go and just set stuff, right? Having to sort of fall back on crafting scripts to do that, or making the profile, pulling it down, putting it in a package, gets pretty tedious. You could go and vote up feature request number 924 on JAMF Nation. People have been waiting since December 2012, still under review. I won't mention, that's not John's fault. I'll stand up for you. No, yeah. I know some of those feature requests can be frustrating when they say under review. I really wanted us to get another tag that was like really still under review, to kind of indicate that something was happening. Sometimes, occasionally, they do actually change and get done. The other option, and this is probably the whole point of my talk, so I've basically talked for 10 minutes, and some of you probably didn't need to hear it, is you can actually force the MDM client to manually check in with your MDM server and get the jobs that are waiting for it. So it doesn't need to wait for that push notification to go up to Apple, come to the device and say, check in. You can force that process to happen. And that's controlled by the MDM client running on the machine. So what you want to do is then, for Casper, you would go to a policy, you'd make it a recurring policy. You might want to say it happens every 15 or every 5. And you run those 2 commands, which basically unloads and reloads or bounces the MDM client daemon. It will then do a check-in, and it will get those profiles. Support are not a big fan of me telling people to do this. So don't go away and say, this is a JAMF supported solution. But I have this running at a lot of the major finance institutions across Australia and Asia, and it's running pretty nicely. We'll call this like a pilot or a test phase at this stage, but it is running really nicely. So effectively what this means, if we go back to our graph, is that APNS is out of the picture, but you're still able to do all those things that require APNS for those MDM commands now. If you want more information on that, come and talk to me later. I'll hand over now to Vasco, who's going to talk about extending the Casper Suite with open source projects.
Thanks, Crisco. I was a little bit skeptical at first when Crisco asked me to do this slide, this topic, because I was never one for open source tools. But like John said yesterday in his presentation, looking at our feature requests, there's a lot of feature requests. There's a lot of needs that have to be done without Casper Suite. And fortunately for us, Mac admins, we've got a lot of smart people out there that make their own tools. So I'm Vasco, system engineer sales engineer for JAMF software. And I do like to kick my slides off on a good note. And today I thought I'd try something new. Anyone watch the keynote, the WWDC keynote? Cool. Well, like Bazuma, I thought I'd start it off rapping to Rapper's Delight, and we'll keep this going throughout the slide.
1, 2, 3, rock.
But Judge, I'm sensing we're getting the same reaction here like we did over there, so I don't think it's really working. So we'll continue on. So from day to day, I go and see a lot of clients, and I have to share my tools with them and whatever's in my briefcase. So let's have a look at what's in my briefcase. And the first one, thank you, Marcus. Yesterday, you revealed it in your presentation. The scenario would have looked like someone has changed their end user password, AD password, and the keychain hasn't updated. Enterprise Connect would have been a good one for this solution. but we're not in the US. And for all of those that aren't familiar with Enterprise Connect, what it can do, it provides single sign-on, AD password notification expiration via the notification center, account management, network share mapping, Mac audit scripts, and you can get all this via, by not binding to AD. But it's not open source. And for all of you that do want this to be available in Australia, I recommend you to pressure your Apple contacts. But that's the open source thing, AD Pass one that Marcus brought up yesterday. Next one I've got. Let's say we want to create a vanilla base Mac OS images. What's the best way to do it? AutoDMG. I love this tool. It's so easy to use. All you need to do is just download the OS X installer from the App Store, drag it onto there, and it will even pick up the updates that's required for it. And you just go ahead and build it. Very easy. And these are all from GitHub. Along the top is where you can get them from. Do you want me to go back, Tony? You all right? The next one on my list, the next question is, say I want to run a NetBoot server, but the Mac Mini is not an option. A lot of infrastructure people don't like Mac Minis in their server room or the Mac Pro bins for some reason. So we can use the NetSAS appliance. You can virtualize and run it off Linux, and then you've got NetBoot there. The other benefits with NetSAS as well, acts as a software update server, and also for JAMF Cloud customers, it can do your LDAP proxy too. An easy way to make a NetBoot image, instead of going through, making a base image, adding the stuff that you need in there, removing the stuff that you don't. Auto Casper MBI. Once again, a very easy tool. You just drag the OS into there. Well, not drag, you select it. You can also use the image that you created with AutoDMG beforehand. And then you just add the Casper package in there, the JSS URL, and give it a name and build it, and that's it. I had this slide up for a drink break, but I'll keep on going. Oh, there we go. Let's say I want to automate the uploading and distributing of software packages. Oh, it's going by itself. Patch management. No, it's coming soon. Very soon. But we'll stay on the open source topic and what you can use, AutoPKG. It's a great system to automate the packaging and software distribution. Along with that, you can get your JSS recipes, where it's just all the recipes of the software applications from that location there. And then if you want to automate that process as well, you can use JSS Importer. This next scenario will kind of go in hand-to-hand with AutoPKG, because once you start running all those policies, your JSS can become a little bit cluttered and messy. But in general, if your JSS is cluttered and it does need a bit of a spring clean, have a look at Spruce. It's a Python script that's used to identify unused packages and scripts that are in your JSS. And then when you rerun it after you find it, you can also remove them. But a big note that's on there as well. Just be careful. It is powerful, and it's a dangerous tool, and you have been warned. I know we all like to trust our end users, that they're all good people. They won't remove your Casper Suite agent from the machines. But I deal with, I have seen a lot of companies that have the developers that they're worried about them removing the Casper Suite agent because they don't want their computer to be managed. So how do you stop them? And I found this script that was by some guy named Troughton or something like that. Oh, yeah, it's you. It's a pretty cool script. It's just a script just to repair the Casper Agent. So how it works, it will check if the managed computer's network connection is live. If it is, it will check if the machine is on the network and it can access the JSS. If both are true, it will check if the agent is on the machine and can contact and run a policy. And if you can't do that, it will repair it. Let's say that there's a change of hands of a whole lot of computers and you need to update those in the JSS. How would you usually do that? In the past, I'd usually just say API, write a script, and upload the list of computers with usernames that you want to change. This one was actually developed by one of our developers, I think. Pretty sure, or someone that works in JAMF software. That's where you can get it as well. It's a pretty cool tool if you want to mass update device attributes in Casper Suite. It does tie into the API. It's very easy to use. So you just enter in the URL, the user, and you can use a custom user in there as well that you've just created. All it just needs is update privileges to computer devices and mobile devices. So you can, in the device type, you can go in there, select whether you want to do computers or mobile devices. I'll select computers for now. If you want to base it off a computer ID or a serial number, you can do that. We'll just select computer ID. And if you can see that, you can. That's a list of the attributes that you can update. So I'll go off the username. And then we upload the CSV with the new users that are going to be assigned to those machines, and we run it. And the other cool thing that you can do as well, you can update mobile device names and enforce them as well. But one requirement that you need for this is the devices need to be supervised. But once again, you have a CSV prepared beforehand with serial numbers or ID of the mobile devices. You enter in those details there, upload the CSV, run, and it does updates the name and then enforces them so the end users can't change them. So that's what was in my briefcase. I want to kind of turn this around. There's tons of other tools out there. What are some common ones for any of you guys that you can share with all of us? That's gone through automatically. No one? All right. On that note, I'd like to call up Matt, who's from our support department, and he's going to be speaking about VPP and Casper Suite.
Hi, everyone. Actually, don't know what order my slides are in. My name is Matt Taylor. I'm a technical support specialist with JAMF software. Been with JAMF for a little bit over a year now. Been working with the software for about 3 years. I'm quite nervous. Been using what we're going to talk about today for nearly all of that, and it's a great tool, so I want to just speak about it a little bit. And today we're going to talk about... Oh, you guys already saw the title slide. OK, don't worry. So we're going to talk about VPP and how it integrates with the Casper Suite. So like I said before, I really like this. That's one reason why I wanted to talk about it. And two, it's quite a frequent flyer for our support queue. And not necessarily because anything's not working. It's normally because people don't know all the intricacies of the functionality. So it's often just a workflow-based thing. Cool. So can anyone tell me what VPP is? Someone put up their hand. Yep. So it's the volume purchasing program. And who's used it? Awesome. So this might be relevant for all of you. So today we're going to talk about some of the methods of distribution available, some information about those methods, a couple of workflow examples, a little bit of information on what goes on behind the scenes to make this all work, a few extra tidbits of information just to hopefully help you avoid any pitfalls that you may run into, and I think at the end of the presentation for everyone, we'll do some Q&A if you guys have any questions. Cool. So distribution methods. First of all, we have VPP Codes. It was the original distribution method. It's essentially almost like a gift card for a particular app to an Apple ID. Not too often used these days. It's almost a little bit being superseded. User-based managed distribution is the second. So it's essentially assigning a content license to a user and their Apple ID. And device-based managed distribution, which is similar to user-based, except you assign the content directly to the device. So it removes the user and the Apple ID out of the equation. I don't know about you guys, but when that particular thing came in, it's pretty cool. Cool. So a few things about user-based. There are some operating system requirements. So iOS 7 and above supported this, and functionality was introduced with JSS 9.3 and above. So it does require an Apple ID to be signed in on the device. That can be a deal breaker for some environments, particularly education, where you might be familiar with the fact that an Apple ID requires the user to be 13 years and above, or it did until recently in some countries. So especially in some education environments where you're dealing with lower ed, that's quite a problem because those kids aren't 13 until they hit year 7, and you want to have iPads out in the field for grades 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that kind of thing. So it is something to be aware of, and it can be a little bit of a deal to manage. It's cross-platform, so it does work on iOS and OS X. And unlike VPP codes, the content is revocable and reassignable. So with VPP codes, you essentially provide a code to the user, to their Apple ID, and then that user owns the content forevermore. With user-based and device-based, you can actually pull that back and reassign that. So user enters your environment, you purchase hundreds of dollars worth of licensed content for them. When they leave, they don't take it with them. And if you can repeat that cycle over and over again, you will save your organization a lot of money. And one license per user/Apple ID. So you assign a license to an Apple ID. That Apple ID can be signed in, signed out on a multitude of devices. There's a soft cap of around 10, I think, but yeah. Workflow example. So user-based managed distribution is built of 3 steps. The first being the VPP invitation. So this is how a user associates their Apple ID with the organization's VPP account. It's quite a short little wizard, and we can allow the user to do that in 3 different ways. They can either receive an email invitation, an on-device prompt, or a prompt inside self-service on the device. It's a short little wizard. User signs in with their Apple ID, accepts terms and conditions, and a couple minutes later, it'll show up as their Apple ID is associated with the VPP account. Nice and simple. That's a once-off process per Apple ID as well. VPP assignment. So now that the association is complete, now we can actually assign content. So that is just made up of simply enabling a couple of different apps or whichever content that you want to use, scoping that assignment to the user and their Apple ID, and the process runs in the background and it assigns that content license to the Apple ID. Once that's complete, you will actually see the content available as a download inside the user's purchase tab when they're signed into the App Store on their device. That's how you know it's completed. And the third step is the actual app deployment itself. So user-based, the license assignment and the actual deployment are held separately. So if the invitation and the assignment deal with the actual content assigning, the app deployment happens inside the app record itself. So we simply create an app record, we set the correct paid or free status, we set the distribution method and any other settings that you want, and we scope to the user. And that'll actually deploy. And if the user does have the correct Apple ID signed in, the license is pulled from there and the app will install, providing everything's working. It's worth mentioning that when you're dealing with app deployment, you will see a different experience depending on whether the device is supervised or unsupervised. Can anyone tell me the difference between those two? It's really hoping. Oh, there you go.
With a supervised device, the users don't necessarily
Brilliant. So as an organization, if you want to deploy and pull back apps without a user having any interaction, so probably especially important, again, in lower ed where you've got really young grade 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 kids, you don't want it to have to accept each app installation. If an iPad is supervised, which can be done with Apple Configurator 1, 2, or DEP, that can all actually happen at the IT admin's discretion and will happen silently on the device. So that's a bit of information about user-based, managed distribution, and a workflow example. Let's talk about device-based. So introduced somewhat recently. Again, some requirements. So functionality for iOS 9 and above was introduced with 9.8.1. Functionality for OS 10.11 and above was introduced with JSS 9.8.2. So a little bit of a difference there. The app does require, so it is required for the app to be enabled for device-based managed distribution, unlike the previous two. This is a setting that the app developer themselves has to change, not something we or Apple can control. So currently not all apps are available to be distributed with this method. It's very high percentage and it grows more every day, but if your organization deals with apps that are more than a year old and they haven't seen an update in the last year, chances are it's probably not going to be able to be distributed with this method. Again, cross-platform, iOS and OS 10. One license per serial number. So unlike the user-based distribution, you give one license to an Apple ID, bit crafty, you can sign that in on 5 devices. This one, it is one license per device. So I don't know why I did 1 and 2 then. And like user-based and unlike VPP codes, it is reassignable and revocable. And a workflow example. So device-based managed distribution, it handles the license assignment and app deployment all in the one place. So all inside the app record itself, which is, it's cleaner, it's easier to set up, and it's easier to maintain, and easier to troubleshoot. So we simply create an app record, whether it's, I've used kind of iOS screenshots, but this is pretty similar to OS 10. We set the same things as before, so the paid or free status, the distribution method, any other settings that you'd like. We set the scope, and we go into the VPP tab, and we hit Assign VPP Content. And that's it. Super simple, no more kind of different places in the JSS to manage this. It's all in this one place. And what that will look like for the admin is, as soon as you scope this and you save this, a management command gets sent to a device to install that application. It sits at pending until the process which runs this in the background actually detects that the license has been successfully assigned. When it first then detects that it has been assigned, the management command gets pushed through and, again, providing everything's working, the app will install on the device. Cool. So now that we've talked a little bit about, I'm glad people laughed at that. I find that so funny. Nailed it. I wanted to talk about what goes on in the background. So most of you may have seen like everything that we've talked about so far, but some of this stuff you may not have seen, and you might find a little bit interesting, and it could help you in troubleshooting in the future. Cool. So first off, there definitely wasn't a Star Wars theme when I was building this. These guys just happened to do that too. I don't know what that says about us as a company, or this as an industry, I don't know.
Were you secretly bought by Disney?
Cool. So when you first upload your VPP token to the database, so assuming you've completed the setup with Apple, what actually happens is all the licenses, so all the content for that account is pulled into the database. The license serial numbers go into one table, and all the information about those licenses, so what it's for, how many there are, that kind of thing, goes into a separate table. So that sits in the database. Now, how does that get updated? You know, how do you assign something and then your JSS knows, oh, hang on, I can't reassign that, it's still taken? Well, that's why we have a process called the VPP Monitor. And what that does is it first starts when you upload the token, and it runs until completion. So it basically checks everything about your account and the associated content. That will run until completion. I've seen environments take 3 seconds to complete. I've seen environments take 30 minutes to complete. It's entirely dependent on how many apps your account has, how many ebooks, and how complicated your assignments are. 60 seconds after completing, it will actually run again, and it's going to keep doing this just to ensure your JSS has the most updated licensing information to complete what you want it to do. So Yeah, and it first kicks off during JSS initialization. So when you first boot up the JSS, that'll start. One thing which kind of not really crucial, but I think it's worth mentioning, is that you can use LDAP limitations, exclusions. So you can use your LDAP information in regards to VPP assignments, app assignments. Every time your VPP monitor runs and does a recalculation for that content license, if you have LDAP in that scope at all, it will do an LDAP recalculation as well. So it's worth noting that if you've got a very complicated setup with your license deployment, you're going to see a lot of LDAP activity going on in the background as well. Just thought it might be worth mentioning. So we've talked a little bit about the distribution methods, workflows for each of them, and a bit of information about kind of what goes on behind the scenes. For those of you who do use the software, you could probably jump in and give this a go, I would think. Presentation's not over. I wanted to give you guys a little bit of more useful information to hopefully, from a support perspective, stop you running into a few pitfalls that you might if you didn't know this. First of all, does your JSS sit behind a proxy? If it does, you're probably going to have to make a few changes to allow that VPP and DEP communication to flow through. We can do that in a couple of ways. We can hard code the values into the database itself, or we can hard code the values into the actual Java virtual machine properties on the server, on the actual web app server, and put a second different database query which will tell the JSS to read those from there instead. And this allows the communication to actually proceed through the proxy without being blocked. It's kind of related to what Crisco was talking about before. VPP token usage. Who's ever used their token in more than one place at one time? Stop. All of you. So if you have your token in more than one place at one time, things just won't work. So one server will take ownership, and neither of them you'll see the benefit. You won't see benefit from either of those places. They'll fight each other, and your assignments won't work, essentially. So it's important that we only use it in one place. If you have been using it in multiple places and you want to make sure that one place has the ownership, change the password of that VPP account Apple ID and re-upload a newly downloaded token to your master instance. And that actually allows that web app or that endpoint to take control. Examples of other server or other instances people might be using it in are Server Apps Profile Manager, Apple Configurator 2. That was new with Apple Configurator 2. Other MDM vendor software, and even another JSS instance. So people might think, oh, I can have a dev environment, and I'll upload my VPP account. I can do some testing with VPP. It's going to cause some issues. Cool. Ebooks. I really wanted to mention this one just because it does come up a little bit. Two things to know with ebooks: not currently available to be distributed with device-based managed distribution. So only VPP codes and user-based. Not something we can have any control over. I'd like to see that change at some point in the future. The reason I'm telling you is the last thing we want to see is someone go out and buy a lot of really expensive ebook content, because ebook content is expensive, only to find out they then have to make 500 Apple IDs and sign that in on 500 different devices. Don't. Secondly, with ebooks, non-revocable. So content license for ebooks, unlike apps with user-based distribution, are non-revocable. Once you assign that content, it's that user's forever. And app record settings. So who has used any of this for deploying before? Have any of you ever actually manipulated the paid or free option inside that app record? Yeah? Okay, so when user-based managed distribution was the mainly used distribution method, saying distribution a lot, you could chop and change how you use that depending on how you were providing the license and whether that was a paid or free app. If we don't use that setting correctly now, it actually has an impact on when the app is deployed, and it can cause the iPad to freak out and not successfully install the app now or afterwards. So it's very important that when we're making an app record, that we can either let the JSS set it to what it automatically should be, or that we double check and make sure that it's using the correct status. Two more things. Fulfillment program, who has heard of this? Cool. That makes one of you, because I didn't know about this until yesterday. Very cool. I had heard of it in the past, and I've actually used it in the past. I didn't know it had a proper name. Thank you, Crisco, for that. What it means is that, you know when you buy a new iOS or OS 10 device and you get free iWork and iLife apps, past, I think, a certain date in 2013. If you're an admin, chances are you are probably going to either wipe that laptop at some point, or historically you would have. And even with iOS, you maybe have been doing that up to a certain point as well. What the fulfillment program does, it's an Apple initiative that allows you to actually request those licenses in the form of managed distribution licenses. So you don't lose them anymore. Your user can't claim them. You don't lose them when you wipe. They get added to your VPP account, and then you can then deploy them. And when we're talking about some apps which are like 20 bucks each, it's kind of cool, right? And migrate your codes. Who here still uses VPP codes? What a great point. OK, one person, cool. So if you are still using codes and you do want to move to managed distribution, you can actually request that Apple change those. So they will take whatever codes that you have available still and convert them to managed distribution licenses. They can then be used to, oh no, hang on. They can then be used to be deployed and reassigned. Rick. Yeah.
Self-service or the old method,
yeah.
Apple won't give you that code.
No, so it's only if the code hasn't been distributed.
Or if it hasn't been distributed.
Or it's been done with the configurator one.
Using
OK.
configurator 1.
It's a bit of favoritism. I didn't know that second part.
So if you use the old method to deploy
Yeah.
code with self-service,
Yeah.
they won't give you that code.
OK. Oh, there you go. Thank you, Rick. Cool. All right, thanks, guys. Thanks for listening. Hopefully, you learned a bit about VPP and probably take some questions at the end. Cool.
Yes, I know we're all looking and it's like, oh no, this guy's back. So Crisco actually just sort of asked me, because I didn't get a chance to talk about the JAMF Helper yesterday, and if we had time today, I'd quickly sort of go through it a bit. I do have some example script on it. I promise no virus USB. It is Crisco's laptop. So for those who weren't in my session yesterday, my name is Daniel. I'm a professional service engineer with JAMF. Do anyone who's a Casper customer, you've had a jump start. Generally, I do the jump starts if it's not done through one of our partners, or you're with an MSP, or any sort of expanded services. Like, oh, I want to turn one server into 6, or I want to run 6 VMs on a MacBook Air. So I thought I'd sort of give that, and show of hands, who has used JAMF Helper? Or who knows what JAMF Helper is? There's a few. Who knows what Cocoa Dialog is? Similar sort of hands, but yeah. So a big thing that I find with trying to get user interaction is the default setting that we have in Casper is, notification center, whereas like tiny little dialog box in the top right-hand corner. But especially in education, I find the machines I'm pushing out to are maybe connected to a data projector, so the notification center is turned off, or the users have just turned it off themselves, or the screen's locked, or they just ignore it. You don't really get much persistent notifications there. And also maybe it's a case of it's just a notification. There's no user input. There's no, OK, click yes or no. Or maybe we only want them to actually just acknowledge it by clicking OK. So what we can do is we can use the tool, which is part of the Casper Suite. It's one of the agents that's installed on any enrolled machine. It's called the JAMF Helper. So can I get out of this and actually show it? Is your machine enrolled?
It's recording.
Oh, it is recording? That's OK if it's recording.
So if you stop the recording and then mirror it, it'll be fine.
Is that going to break anything?
If you stop the recording first, it'll be okay. If you don't, it'll break the recording.
Can you do that for me?
Dan just asked someone to do it.
I don't want to be responsible for breaking something. Again. So like some examples that I've had to come across of like, why would we need a user's input? Most common one is software updates, because users ignore that. And they'll say, oh, I'll do it another time, I'll do it another time. So we can put migrations and stuff like that on. Fantastic. Oh, root access as well. What could go wrong?
Kitsy's not here, is he?
Okay.
Do you want me to authenticate for this? Or?
No, you've already authenticated. That is root.
That'll find out.
Yeah. No, it's already a hash. Like, if I go, let's. All right. So if I go, who am caps lock? Who am I? Root. Okay, I've got a new presentation. RM dash. We all thought it. Come on. Things you shouldn't do. Leave me alone with a computer with root access. So I've got my USB here. I wrote together a couple of scripts about what I need to do. So my lovely first one is, if I go sudo, just because I like doing sudos. So I'll show you what this script does as well. It's a very simple one. Oh yeah, it's doing something in the background. I forgot about that.
I'm really scared.
It's just that wait, you know? It's actually, well, we're connected to the internet. What it's actually doing is I've got this script running where it's actually going to do some stuff. We can have a look at it. That's not it. Here we go. So what I'm actually doing is, can we see that okay? Do I need to make it bigger? Make it bigger? Oh. How do you make it bigger? View, text display. Oh, I don't know how to do that in that. I'll do this. I do this in text editor. It's easier. Okay. So what this is going to do at the moment is, show of hands, who knows what that line does? Yeah, but what is it doing? It's very easy to read. AppleScript is very easy to read. Remember Jeopardy? Yeah. Say, okay, Jeopardy. And killed it, and I'll take clustering for 300. So what I can do is, because users like to ignore things, but if, set their volume to 100 and then play a noise, they might get annoyed. But I can actually do lots of stuff like that. That was a quick one there where it's like, okay, yes or no. And then depending on what the outcome was, it's kind of interesting to see here. It's all muddled up where you say, okay, button 1, button 2. Very easy to customize. And then I could say, okay, if the button result was 0, I'll just say, okay, we'll try again later. And the 0 was maybe later. That was the button I defined. If I said Jeopardy, the message was actually 2 for I'll take clustering for 200. I always put a 1 in as well. 1 is the default error code. So if something went happen, the process crashed halfway through, at least the user gets a message. Now that's sort of like, well, that's annoying. People don't like music playing up where they're just talking about what the hell is this Jeopardy thing. But there's other examples. So if I look at going to this, and I go sudo. Let's say we have a policy internally that all devices need to be encrypted. Yeah? It's quite common, especially if there's a one-to-one, so you've got your groups based on, okay, it's a mobile device, not encrypted. And rather than the users where encryption has to occur when they have to log out. Now, a lot of laptop users just close the lid, walk away. So we want to give them a little prompt. We want to give them some information here. So I put the music in all of them, I'm sorry. I'm going to turn that off. But the quick short there, I will actually edit that, because that actually runs JAMF commands. If I have a look at what that one does, I'm going to just do just do that. It's basically a AF play to play that MP4 file that I curled down from GitHub. That's fine. So let's run that again. Yeah, thought so. I like breaking stuff. But if we have a look at what it is, because it was a bit brief because I didn't want to do the music. This was much more funnier in my head than when I actually stood up here and did this. But I had options for a drop-down where I allow users to delay it, because I didn't necessarily want to force it then and there. And so I said, OK, based on the actions, I could actually customize what my delay options are. See that there? Is that big enough? Yeah? So this is down into seconds. So 0 is, OK, they can do it now. Or they can pull down that drop-down to say, try it in, who knows what 300 seconds is? Come on, 5 minutes, very good. 1800. I know it's Friday and it's mornings and math, no. But so very simple to do. You've even got terminal or Spotlight. 1800 divided by 60. Very easy, very simple. So then you can customize that. But also, you'll notice I've only made one button. So I can't say no skip. I can let them delay it at any level that I want to let them delay it, but I can't tell them that they can close it. You can also make this thing full screen. So they can't even move it out of the corner or anything like that. So now, as I said yesterday, I'm not a good scripter. I'm not a strong scripter. I can do dangerous things. JAMF support, I'm blanking on the person who put it to, but there's a GitHub on JAMF support about a JAMF Helper GUI, which Rich sort of kind of hinted at yesterday. And if you're not a scripter, you can download this. It's on our GitHub. You go to JAMF support GitHub, and then you'll find JAMF Helper GUI. It's an Xcode project. You can tweak it. It's all written in Swift. And the output is this. So you can say the type. So a HUD, which is the windows that you were seeing there. A utility basically just makes it a similar sort of window but black, or full screen. Be careful with full screen. Please make sure you have something in there to kill the process once it's done. You wouldn't think I'd have to say that, but put in the title, put in everything, your alignment options, all these different options that are available on the man page for it. Now, one of the most common questions I get is, why would I use JAMF Helper when Cocoa Dialog will let me do progress bars and display lists? The biggest thing I've found with users that I quite like Cocoa Dialog, but I have to abide by what my customer needs. And a lot of my customers that I've dealt with do not allow open source software in their environment. Financial institutions are particular on that one. If they say, where did this software come from? Oh, it's from the same software that we're paying with JAMF. Fine, perfect, it's built in, done. Oh no, this is from the GitHub and we have to do the update onto it. That, especially with InfoSec teams, when we've all tried to have those conversations with them, is always a challenge. That's all I was going to do really on the JAMF Helper. I don't think I really had any other, there wasn't any other slide for it. Do we have time for Q&A? Yeah? We all want to do Q&A? Don't leave me up here by myself.
Anyone got any questions on any of those things?
David. The VPP questions. Matt, get up here.
Yes. What's the situation with international app stores?
Some are enabled, some are not. I can't list them for you.
Oi, get into the light.
Oh,
Sorry,
I've been waved
on the
at.
dark side.
Yeah, so there are some countries which aren't enabled for the different distribution methods. Anything in particular, any country you're asking in particular?
Or if I buy a VPP, buy some software through a United States store, can I distribute it in Australia?
Now you can.
Yeah.
Apple recently announced last year,
Yeah, it was last
I think it was, that there's only 26 countries that support VPP stores and the DEP stores. However, if you have an office in a VPP country, you can actually distribute that app into non-VPP countries with the caveat that that app is on that app store. That's the biggest thing that I've found, is like if you've got an app for a French TV show, France is part of the VPP, and you push that out to, say, let's say Bahrain, not part of the VPP. That app also was not licensed out onto the Bahrain App Store. So even though, yes, legally you can because you purchased it, you have to make sure it's on the end user's app store. Is that it?
Sometimes works out cheaper too, if you buy your app sold through the US and distribute here.
Wait for certain economic climates and wait for the dollar to go up or down. But yes, but yeah, that's a recent sort of thing now there, where it was a case of they've expanded out to international, but they haven't added VPP countries. Any other questions? Oh no,
I think we've got someone at the back.
it's Rick.
Turn his mic off.
How do you deal with two VPP tokens? So the examples that we see a lot are when Apple have changed their deployment methods, they've had to set up a new deployment account for DEP. And then teachers will buy 100 apps from one VPP account and 100 from the other. So when you're trying to scope an app, you actually have to pick which account you're coming from. And then you've got, I don't know, 20 left over or that can't be deployed. And you then have to have two app policies to push out.
That just comes down to poor management.
Uh,
No, it is something I've seen. Multiple tokens, different purchasing departments. You could have one large organization, but everyone else has their own budget and no one wants to share. It's easier to split it up by sites if you're using the JSS. If people are buying from different things, they should only be going to their devices. There's generally never a crossover of those devices and purchasing. But yeah, it is always fun. Anyone to add on that?
No, we most commonly see it split up with sites.
Yeah.
okay.
Anyone else?
Has anyone got any outstanding support tickets they want to raise with Matt right now?
We spoke about this.
So dealing with VPP and iOS, what is the expected behavior when you purchase your content? How is it supposed to work? Do you individually have to put every purchased app into your list, or is the update purchase content supposed to refresh everything in one sweep?
Yeah, so every time the VPP Monitor runs, if you have that update, just for those who don't know, there's an option called Update Purchase Content inside the VPP account on the JSS inside the settings. If you have that enabled, I feel like I'm holding that really badly. If you have that enabled, if the VPP Monitor runs and it detects that you've got new content, it will actually automatically generate that app record for you. It won't set the scope or set any custom configuration, but it puts the shell template there for you. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
I think so. So in other words, when you purchase your content, it should automatically populate into your JSS.
Yeah, so the licenses themselves should definitely come in. Depending on whether or not you have that option enabled, I'm just going to stop using that. Depending on whether or not you have that option enabled, you'll get the app record itself, but the licenses themselves should always be coming in.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a tick box in the JSS, pre-populate purchase content. So then you go to the app section and they're all there. Any other questions? Does anyone want to throw anything at us? Yeah, they're at. I'm always wary.
Imagine if it was the opposite of throwing out swag, if the audience had stuff they could throw at the speaker. Maybe good idea for
There's a
next
lot of
year.
people I don't necessarily trust to be kind in that
trust you.
respect here.
All right. Was this format useful, like kind of the lightning talk thing? Yeah? Cool. Awesome.
Are there any other topics people would like to have seen added instead about the JSS? The sounds of silence. Health checks?
You'll actually hear a little bit about that a little bit later on today.
Yeah, that's where we have the last session from some JAMF guys with Barry and Rob. So, but definitely we'd love to hear more input about certain topics that you would like to see, so that we can sort of make sure we're catering to you guys.
Thanks very much.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.